The silicone ink was barely dry on the final signature page when the weight of 22 years evaporated from my shoulders. The acquisition closed on a rainy Friday afternoon in a high-rise office overlooking downtown Seattle, Washington. My life's work, Vanguard Analytics, was officially sold for an incredible $18 million. But per my instructions, the wire transfer bypasses our shared domestic accounts, sitting silently in an insulated private wealth account. Sitting across from me at the mahogany conference table was Leo Sterling, my corporate counsel and closest confidant for the last 6 years. He wasn't celebrating. He simply adjusted his glasses and looked at me with a solemn, unnerving intensity. "Arthur, I'm about to give you some advice that will defy every human instinct you have," Leo said, leaning forward and lowering his voice. "But if you want to survive the next 48 hours with your sanity and your wealth intact, you will do exactly as I say." I frowned, setting my pen down. "Leo, we just finalized an 8-figure exit. What could possibly be wrong?" "Go home tonight," Leo said flatly. "Look your wife, Vivian, in the eye and tell her the acquisition collapsed at the midnight hour. Tell her a hidden liability clause triggered, the regulator stepped in, and Vanguard is completely bankrupt. Tell her you are utterly broke." I stared at him, a harsh laugh escaping my throat. "Are you insane? Vivian has been waiting for this day for 5 years. Why would I lie to my own wife about losing everything?" "Because for the past 6 months, I've been running the mandatory background audits for the purchasing firm," Leo replied, sliding a thick, unmarked manila folder across the table. "And I uncovered a parallel financial reality you know absolutely nothing about." With trembling fingers, I flipped open the folder. The first page was a spreadsheet detailing a series of high-frequency corporate wire transfers. Beside each transaction were 2 authorizing names, Vivian Vance Pendleton and my 26-year-old son, Julian. "What is this?" My voice cracked in the quiet room. "Your family has been systematically bleeding your company's operational accounts dry," Leo explained calmly. "Fake vendor invoices, shell consulting firms based out of Delaware, and padded marketing retainers. Over the past 3 years, they have successfully siphoned $3.6 million out of Vanguard Analytics into private offshore entities in the Cayman Islands." The air left my lungs as if I'd been struck. "Julian, too? He's my chief financial officer. I handed him the keys to the kingdom." "Your son didn't just participate, Arthur. He engineered it," Leo said ruthlessly. "He used his Wharton finance degree to build an airtight, artificial deficit that would remain completely invisible until a deep forensic audit took place. They didn't think the acquisition would happen this fast. They were waiting for the massive sale payout to double their take and vanish." Leo opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me, revealing a string of encrypted emails recovered from the company's server during the pre-sale compliance sweep. One message, sent by Julian to his mother just 3 weeks prior, read, "Once the tech conglomerate signs off on the final valuation, Dad's cut will be around 9 or 10 million after taxes. We initiate the split immediately, transfer our holding balances to our Lisbon accounts, and sever ties. Let him handle the cleanup. He's lived for that company anyway. It's time we get our dividend." Vivian's response was immediate and chilling. "Agreed. I've given him 25 years of social appearances and late dinners. This isn't theft, Julian, it's back pay." My knuckles turned white as I gripped the edge of the desk. My entire existence, every sacrifice, every missed milestone, every late night building a legacy for my family, had been reduced to a target for a corporate heist executed by the people sleeping under my roof. "So," I whispered, the warmth completely draining from my body, leaving behind a cold, mechanical clarity, "how do we play this?" Leo smiled, a sharp, humorless glint in his eye. "We give them exactly what they deserve. We set the bait." The drive back to our estate in Bellevue, Washington, was the longest 48 minutes of my life. The wealth sitting in that secure offshore account felt entirely hollow. I wasn't going home to a family. I was walking into a nest of corporate thieves. When I entered the house, Vivian was standing in the kitchen, casually pouring a glass of expensive white wine. She was wearing a designer dress and diamond earrings, all funded, item by item, by the company I had spent my life building. "Arthur, you're late," she said, offering a practiced, brilliant social smile. "How did the closing meeting go with the buyers? Is the wire transfer initiated?" I dropped my leather briefcase heavily onto the marble island. I loosened my tie, let my posture sag completely, and ran a trembling hand over my face, playing the part of a broken man. "The deal is dead, Vivian," I said, my voice deliberately hollow. Her smile vanished instantly. Her glass paused halfway to her lips. "What do you mean dead? The contract was finalized." "The purchasing firm's legal team found an unmitigated liability clause during the final compliance check," I lied, looking down at the floor. "An internal deficit they couldn't look past. Not only did they pull out, but our primary creditors have called in our corporate loans. Vanguard is underwater. I'm completely bankrupt. We are ruined." The color drained from her face so fast she looked ghost-like. She slammed her wineglass down on the counter. "Bankrupt? Arthur, that's impossible. What about the assets? What about our payout?" "There is no payout," I said, letting out a ragged breath. "The banks are freezing our primary accounts by Monday. We are going to lose the Bellevue house, the vehicles, everything. I might face personal liability for the outstanding vendor debts." Before she could speak, Julian walked into the kitchen, his eyes glued to his tablet. At 26, he possessed the calm, arrogant demeanor of an Ivy League graduate who believed he was always the smartest man in the room. "Hey, what's with the screaming?" Julian asked, looking up. "Mom looks like she's about to faint." Vivian turned to him, her voice shaking with a volatile mix of panic and rage. "Your father lost the acquisition. The company collapsed. He's bankrupt." I watched my son's face with surgical precision. There was no flash of sympathy, no concern for my health, my stress, or my well-being. His eyes instantly narrowed into a cold, transactional calculation. "Define bankrupt, Dad," Julian said, his voice entirely flat. "What's the exact net damage?" "Negative 2.5 million after corporate liquidation," I said, making my voice crack slightly. "Every domestic account we own will be swept by creditors. I'll have to declare personal bankruptcy." Vivian gripped the edge of the counter, pouring herself another full glass of wine. Her hands were shaking violently. "What about the emergency reserves? The secondary accounts you always talked about?" "Those were tied directly to Vanguard's operational stock, Julian," I said, looking straight at my son. "They are completely worthless now. I'm sorry, I failed you both. 22 years of work, gone in an afternoon." Vivian's panic suddenly hardened into an icy, venomous contempt. The mask of the supportive wife shattered entirely. "You failed us? You failed us? Do you have any earthly idea what I have sacrificed for your pathetic obsession with that company, Arthur?" "Vivian, please!" "No!" she screamed, her face twisting with rage. "I spent 25 years enduring your late nights, your missed anniversaries, and your corporate dinners, all for the promise of this exit, and you hand me bankruptcy? You are an absolute failure." Julian stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, his eyes locked onto mine with utter disdain. "Mom, calm down. Let's handle this logically." He looked at me like I was a piece of faulty machinery. "Maybe it's best if you go upstairs and figure out how you're going to handle the creditors, Dad. We need to digest this." I nodded slowly, picking up my briefcase, and walked out of the kitchen. That night, the house was dead silent, but the air was thick with malice. Around midnight, I left my bedroom and slipped down the hallway. Leo had provided me with a highly sensitive, military-grade audio receiver disguised as a premium fountain pen, which I had casually left on the desk in Julian's home office earlier that evening. Sitting in the absolute dark of my car in the driveway, I put on my headphones and activated the encrypted live feed. Their voices came through with terrifying clarity. "This is a complete disaster, Julian," Vivian hissed. "3 years of careful planning completely down the drain. We can't just pack up and leave with nothing." "Calm down, Mom. We aren't leaving with nothing," Julian replied, his tone chillingly analytical. "We still have the $3.6 million split across our Lisbon and Cayman accounts. That money is safe from his primary corporate creditors because the shell companies are entirely in our names. But if your father files for personal bankruptcy, the federal courts will deploy forensic accountants." Vivian pointed out, her voice sharp. They'll comb through Vanguard's historic wire transfers. They'll find the fake vendor contracts you engineered. We could face prison time, Julian. A bitter laugh came from my son. Not if we cut ties before the bankruptcy petition is legally filed. You need to file for divorce first thing tomorrow morning. Claim extreme emotional distress, asset hiding on his part, whatever it takes. We need to legally separate your name from his financial carcass before Monday morning. And what about Arthur? Vivian asked, her voice devoid of a single ounce of human empathy. What about him? Julian answered smoothly. He's entirely useless to us now. Let him drown in the debt. He built the burning house. Let him burn inside it. I took off the headphones, the audio cutting out into the cold night air. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, but my tears had completely dried up. I pulled out my phone and sent a brief text to Leo. The bait is fully swallowed. Execute phase 2 tomorrow morning. The next morning, Vivian served me divorce papers at the breakfast table. There was no tears, no grand dramatic speech, just a thick legal envelope slid next to my coffee cup. I'm filing for an expedited dissolution of marriage, Arthur, she said, her voice completely flat and detached. I refuse to let your financial incompetence drag me into destitution. I deserve a life unaffected by your failures. Julian stood right behind her chair, his arms crossed over his chest, presenting a flawless, united corporate front. Mom's right, Dad. Given the impending corporate collapse, it's best if we split the remaining family assets before the bankruptcy court liquidates everything. It's just business. I looked down at the documents, then up at the two people I had spent my life protecting. You're divorcing me less than 12 hours after finding out I lost my company? I'm divorcing you because you are a liability, Vivian snapped. 25 years and you couldn't even protect our wealth. We've already structured the division of domestic property with our own legal counsel. Julian interjected smoothly, sliding a secondary agreement toward me. To shield what's left from your business creditors, Mom takes the Bellevue estate. I take the luxury vehicles. You keep Vanguard Analytics and all associated corporate debts. Sign it, and we can settle this quietly. I nodded slowly, picking up the fountain pen, the very same pen that had recorded their malicious late-night strategy session. I signed the first page, then the second. Vivian let out a shallow breath, a triumphant, satisfied smile creeping onto her face. Thank you for being mature enough not to make this difficult, Arthur. Just one question before you take the cars in the house, I said, calmly setting the pen down on the marble island. What if I'm not actually bankrupt? The smile faltered on her lips. What? What if the acquisition closed perfectly yesterday afternoon? I continued, my voice gaining a sharp, chilling resonance. What if $18 million is sitting completely insulated in a private wealth account right now? Julian's arrogant posture stiffened instantly. The color began to drain from his face. Dad, what kind of ridiculous game are you playing? What if I know about the fake vendor invoices, Julian? I stood up, towering over the table. What if I know about the shell companies in Delaware? What if I know about every single one of the $3.6 million you both systematically siphoned out of my company over the last 3 years? An absolute suffocating silence fell over the kitchen. Vivian's hand began to shake so violently, she dropped her car keys onto the floor. Arthur, you don't know what you're talking about. Leo, you can come in now, I called out toward the foyer. The front door opened, and Leo Sterling walked into the kitchen, flanked by 2 armed federal agents and a representative from the corporate fraud division. Julian stumbled backward against the counter, his tablet slipping from his hands and shattering on the floor. What is the meaning of this? Vivian whispered, her voice cracking with terror. Leo opened his leather briefcase, pulling out 2 thick folders. Vivian Vance Pendleton and Julian Anderson, you are being formally served with a civil lawsuit for corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The federal agent stepped forward, flashing his badge. Additionally, we are executing an emergency federal asset freezing warrant on all offshore entities registered to your names in Lisbon and the Cayman Islands. Every encrypted email and altered transaction ledger from the past 3 years has been seized as evidence. Dad, please! Julian stammered, his Ivy League confidence completely evaporating into pure panic. Please, it was just asset management. We can talk about this. I let out a cold, hollow laugh. You stole millions from my life's work. You plotted to take half of my exit payout, leave me with the wreckage, and vanish to Europe. You called me a financial carcass. You waited for me to burn. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on the audio file from the previous night. Julian's recorded voice echoed loudly through the high-ceilinged kitchen. He's entirely useless to us now. Let him drown in the debt. Vivian's legs gave out, and she collapsed hard into her chair, burying her face in her hands as tears finally streamed down her face. Arthur, please! We are your family! Family doesn't run a commercial heist against their own blood, I said, leaning down to look her in the eyes. The divorce papers you just served me? They are legally invalid, filed under fraudulent asset concealment pretenses. The Bellevue house? Bought with Vanguard funds? Completely mine. The vehicles? Mine. Every single asset you tried to shield from my fake bankruptcy belongs to me. Leo added with a ruthless smile. And the $3.6 million you siphoned, you will be paying it back to the acquisition estate with full interest, compounding penalties, and all associated legal fees. We don't have that kind of liquidity without the offshore accounts, Julian cried out, his voice cracking completely. I offered my son a dark, uncompromising smile. Then I guess you'll be broke. Funny how that works, isn't it? 6 months later, I sat on the private balcony of my new minimalist penthouse overlooking the Seattle skyline. The air was clean, crisp, and entirely peaceful. Vivian had pleaded guilty to conspiracy and corporate theft to avoid a highly publicized federal trial. She received 3 years of intense financial probation, mandatory community service, and a total restitution order that forced her to liquidate her jewelry, her high-end wardrobe, and her country club memberships. Stripped of the luxury lifestyle she had built on my back, she was last reported renting a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, working a low-tier retail job just to cover her legal debts. Julian, trusting his expensive education, tried to fight the charges in court. It was a catastrophic mistake. The federal jury took exactly 42 minutes to convict him on all counts of wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. His Wharton degree was rendered entirely useless, his career destroyed before it truly began. He was sentenced to 24 months in a federal correctional facility. How did you spot it so early? I had asked Leo over a celebratory drink after the sentencing. Leo had simply smiled, swirling his ice. 20 years in corporate law teaches you to watch the margins, Arthur. The way Vivian kept demanding updates on the exact acquisition timeline, and the way Julian fought so hard to be the sole administrator of the vendor payout accounts. It was too convenient. I started digging, and the numbers never lie. I sold the Bellevue estate to completely wash away the poisoned memories. I donated a significant portion of the $18 million acquisition payout to local tech education programs for underprivileged youth, investing the rest independently behind multi-factor biometric security barriers where no one else can ever reach it. I live quietly now. I don't date, and I don't give out my trust easily anymore. Perhaps I never will again. But as I watch the sun set over the Puget Sound from a home where no one else holds a key, I realize the ultimate truth. Blood does not guarantee loyalty. A shared last name does not guarantee love. And sometimes, the people closest to you are just waiting for you to look away so they can strike. I just made sure that when the strike came, I was the one who won.